Hello friends, welcome. Friends, I don't know how many of you have seen this article which says that in relief to telcos, 5G radiation rules have been eased. So this article came on January 2nd, 2025, and before that there were multiple articles which were talking about easing of rules of 5G radiation by DOT on account of the need for reducing capex and helping the operators able to reach out a large amount of people using less number of BTSs. That is the whole motive of these rules getting relaxed. Now friends, I think many of you who have been following this sector will know that the radiation, electromagnetic radiation, has been a point of controversy in India for a long period of time. At the time when 3G technology was launched, a lot of activists went and launched a lot of court cases, went and lobbied, and therefore there was a huge hue and cry about the effect of health impact of RF radiation, and that became a point of bone of contention, which resulted in DOT coming out with rules for setting threshold limits for RF radiation, which is 1/10 of international standard. Now what DOT has done? DOT has relaxed those rules. So what I am planning to do, friends, is that I am going to take this opportunity in this video to explain this complex term of EMF and the issues related with it in most simple form as possible so that even a layman can understand. Now while doing so, I will like to keep the discussion as grounded as possible so that the important technical issues are not missed, though I am going to explain those technical issues in a simple manner so that everybody can understand. Okay? So that's the whole purpose of this video. Now friends, what I did was I actually wrote an article yesterday. This article which I wrote with the headline this, and I'm going to paste a link in this description, and this article captures the issues and the points of discussion which are going to cover in this video. So in order to facilitate a more efficient discourse as we progress in this video, I have created certain slides and I have posed certain questions and some theoretical concepts which I am going to explain to you using certain some diagrams which is going to be right in front of you. So if you look at the first question or the first issue being discussed here is what is a typical antenna system, because people won't know, a layman won't know what is an antenna system is and why there is a concern. And for that you need to have some level of understanding to appreciate what I am going to talk about. So for that, friends, I have drawn this diagram. So let me take you through quickly as to what the concepts are without you going into a very detailed deep dive into these matters. Okay? So if you see here in this diagram, there is an antenna which has been shown by an arrow diagram. And this antenna is fed with a power which is called P, which has been designated as P. Means every antenna system will be fed with certain power. Right? Without power, RF cannot be RF cannot emanate out of the RF this antenna system. So what happens is that in a conventional antenna where a power is fed which is not biased to radiate in a particular direction, like if you look at this, there are antennas which are biased to radiate in a particular direction, means there is some kind of gain in a particular direction. So if you leave this gain part aside for the time being, let's assume that it is an isotropic antenna where all radiation happens uniformly in all directions, just like what you see in the green circle, this circle. If you see here, all radiation happen in green circle. So let's say if a power is fed into an antenna system and the radiation is uniform across all circles, so then you will see that the pattern of the lobe which is going to emanate from the antenna system is going to be spherical in nature, which has been designated by this green circle, right? So this says that antenna radiation without any gain. But this is not the conventional way antenna systems are designed. Antenna systems are always designed with gain so that there is a bias in a particular direction. So what happens is that whenever you are feeding power in an antenna system, the power actually gets concentrated in the beam. So whatever power that you fed, it is going to enhance the power output of the antenna system because it gets concentrated in a narrow beam versus getting spread out in a spherical manner. That's why what happens is that the power fed in the antenna is multiplied by the gain of the antenna system, and that gain, with that particular gain, the power is calculated at the point of measurement. So when you say power calculation in the point of measurement means what? The power is whatever is getting radiated from here, right? You see, whatever is getting radiated from here, and that is distributed over a surface area, and that surface area is going to be the point of contact with a human. So what happens is that power, the unit of threshold, is decided based on power divided by surface area, and that is going to be a power which typically will be originating from an antenna which doesn't have any gain in an isotropic manner. So this whole concept of EIRP, which says effective isotropic radiating power, is a concept which you might have heard, many technical people might have heard. I don't want to get into the technicalities of this issue. What I am basically saying is that in a typical antenna system, when you feeding power within the antenna system, that power is multiplied by the gain of the antenna, and that gain, that power, which is basically that equation which comes out right on the left hand side, that power is considered to be having fed in an isotropic antenna which will have a radiation pattern which is shown in the dotted line. And then on the basis of that, you measure the power at the edge of the place where human contact comes. So that becomes P into G divided by area square, surface area. So that becomes power divided by surface area is the threshold, unit of threshold. So this is one point which is very important to understand. The second point is that generally you will not find that there is only one BTS in a power tower location. There will be multiple BTSs which will be located in a particular tower location. Like you see here that I have basically shown you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 BTS system. So every BTS system will have a power low. P1, P2, P3, P4. So when you are measuring threshold over this dotted line, which is a hypothetical spherical area, which is all the powers which are fed into the antenna system multiplied by the gain, if you add all those powers, then what happens is that whatever a point where you're measuring the threshold for the point where the human is going to come in contact is going to be the addition of all these beams, because these beams are overlapping on top of each other, and therefore even though these beams are separated in frequency domain, but since all the frequencies will have an impact on the overall power on the surface area where the human is going to come in contact with, therefore these are all additive in nature, and therefore what I have shown here, P1 plus P2 plus P3 plus P4. So the threshold limit is set to the maximum power that antenna can transmit, right? And the regulator actually has set a maximum power limit that antenna can transmit, taking this into consideration, P1 plus P2 plus P3 plus P4. So if you have n number of BTSs located in that, so the threshold limit is accordingly set and modified, taking into consideration this particular point of aggregation of all the multiple beams which are transmitting in that same direction and additive in nature. And as I told you, the power is watt per square meter. Now, what was the earlier threshold limit? Means what is the current threshold limit? Now, this is going to become a little bit technical. So I don't want you to focus on the technicalities of it. So you just need to understand one simple thing, that there is a frequency range. What is frequency range? Because when RF signals are designed, they need to transmit at different frequency bands. So there are frequency bands which can be 400 megahertz to 2 gigahertz, and then 2 gigahertz to 3 gigahertz, 300 gigahertz, not beyond that, because beyond that it does not matter. We basically get into a sphere of ionization of gamma rays, ultraviolet rays. Those are basically in a different dimension altogether, but RF waves are typically concentrated within this particular band where the beams do not ionize human body, or the cells are not getting ionized, which is a different point of discussion which I am not going to confuse you in this particular video. But if you notice here that the frequency ranges and the corresponding threshold limits are differently defined. So the bands which are below 2 gigahertz, from 400 to 200 to 2 gigahertz, is basically having a formula of F by 2000. And then from 2 gigahertz to 300, the limit is 1 watt per square meter. Now the question that is going to come to your mind is that why? So this I have already told you where the measurement is done. This is going to be at the edge of the antenna where the human contact is. The RFS first encounters the human. It is not at the base of the location or not here. It is there. But now coming to the point which I was discussing here, that the frequency ranges are all different and the equations basically or the limit set are frequency dependent, right? Between 400 megahertz and 2 gigahertz, and from 2 gigahertz and 300 gigahertz it is set at a constant level of 1. So why? So let's look at that particular reason first. Why it is doing it is like that? It is because that the lower frequency band are more prone to causing human interaction to a larger distance, because they travel farther, bend around corners and penetrate human skin more deeper compared to higher frequency bands. So this is important to understand that why low frequency you can actually get indoor, it can travel corners, etc. So a human being is more likely to get impacted by a low frequency band, and therefore the threshold limits are actually set much higher. If you see here, much higher for lower frequency band compared to higher frequency band, and after a certain threshold of 2 gigahertz, it is held constant, right? You can very clearly see that, right? And when you go for higher frequency band here, if you see is that higher frequency band, the threshold limits are set constant, because high frequency band, what happens is that they are basically directional, highly directional, easily obstructed by barriers, and have limited penetration indoors, and therefore they are set at a constant value which is higher. So threshold limit means higher means you can transmit more power, whereas when the threshold limits are set lower means the BTS cannot transmit beyond a certain value of power, which is lowest for the lowest frequency band. So probably you have understood this. That is why if you see here the curve, which was the current curve, actually it is for the 700 megahertz band, it is 0.35 watts per square meter. So if you divide 700 divided by 2000, you will get this value, right? This value you will get 0.35 square watts per square meter, and it kind of goes to 0.9 watts per square meter for 1800 megahertz band, and then thereafter after that it becomes 1 watt per square meter. However, in the new rules, when the rules have been revised, this has been made 5 times. Means now 700 megahertz the base station can transmit at 1.75 watt per square meter, and for 1800 it is 4.5 watts per square meter, and beyond 2 gigahertz this is going to be 5 watt per square meter, right? So that is what the rules have, how the rules have changed. I have explained to you, right? Now comes to the main fact, that main point is that will this new threshold increase health risk and help operators save capex? Because that's the main point of discussion here, whether the threshold, if you have increased threshold, whether there is going to be increased health risk or save capex. My point is, and you will read my article and you will understand, no, but not much, but it won't change significantly, and there won't be a significant impact, but we will talk about this in the course of this video. Why there will be not much change in the either the health risk or the saving of capex. Both is not going to change significantly, and there are reasons for it. We'll talk about this. The first main point of discussion here is the worst case criteria, and I'm going to talk about that, what basically it means. Second will be coverage versus capacity, and third is going to be the handset EMF rules have not been changed, right? So we'll take one issue at a time, right? We'll basically talk about the worst case criteria first. What is worst case criteria? For that I will go back to the same diagram here, and I'll blow it up a little bit for you to have a look better. So what happens is that when you are transmitting, let's say if you are transmitting in a tower system where multiple antennas are located and every beam is basically biased in a particular direction, let's say, and consider this P1 is at the lowest frequency, let's say this is 700 megahertz band, and P2 let's say is 1800 megahertz band, P4 is let's say 2300 megahertz band, and P3 let's say is at 3500 megahertz band. I'm just making it up. Now what happens is that, since as I told you, if you see here, for the lowest frequency band, the threshold limits are the lowest, means the antenna cannot transmit at a very high power compared to a higher frequency band. But what happens is that in an antenna system like this, because it is an integrated system and everything is getting aggregated at the point of measurement, then what happens is that the threshold which is governing the lowest frequency band takes prominence. Means even if you have got better threshold, or more relaxed threshold for P2, P3 and P4, what is going to dictate is the 700 megahertz band threshold, because that is the minimum that you can transmit from this antenna system because of the presence of 700 megahertz band. So what happens is that all these bands, right, threshold limits which are much higher than the 700 megahertz band becomes completely null and void, and you are being directed by the limits which are being considered for the 700 megahertz band, which has got the lowest threshold. That is why this worst case condition actually kind of undermines the gains of setting higher threshold limit for frequency band which are higher, because normally it's an integrated system where every type of BTSs are all located in the same tower location. I think you probably understood what is the why this is like this. Second is coverage versus capacity, and this is a very important concept which I am going to cover in my next slide. So if you look at this, and let me just zoom out a little bit so that you can see it better. So what happens is that typically there are two different kinds of network. One network is capacity based network, another is coverage based network. Now what is capacity based network? So if you look at all these arrows are basically designated as BTS location. Now in a capacity based network, what happens is that the inter-site distance, the site distance between two base stations are set such that it takes into consideration the population density of this area. Because what happens is that when you are an operator, you get a certain quantum of spectrum, and that may be 10 megahertz, 20 megahertz, etc. So the capacity of you able to serve a certain density of customer is dependent upon geographical segmentation of the BTSs, means how much the coverage the BTS has and how much bandwidth you have been assigned by the regulator. So let's say if you are bandwidth constrained, then what you do, you bifurcate the geography into smaller regions in order to take care of higher density of population. So when you do that, then the network becomes capacity based network. Then what happens is that even if you have a capability to transmit at a higher power from these BTSs, you can't, because your inter-site distance is governed by the capacity requirement. Therefore, there is virtually no gain even if you are able to transmit at a higher power, right? So in a situation like this, there is virtually no gain. There is no saving in capex, etc. if this is a multi-BTS site where 700 megahertz is there and this is a capacity driven network. I think probably you've understood, right? As far as capacity driven network is concerned. Then there is another concept called coverage based network. Now coverage based networks are different from capacity based network, where the population density in the coverage area of the BTS is quite low. So what happens is that you extend the coverage of this BTS to the maximum level possible, because you are not limited by the population density and you have got sufficient bandwidth to take care of people who reside in this particular area. So when you are extending the coverage of the BTSs to the maximum level possible, then what is the limiting factor? The limiting factor now is the handset. It is not the BTS, because the BTS can transmit at very high power and you can extend the coverage to a very large area. But the handset's ability to reach the base station, which is the uplink, is limited because there has been no change in the EMF regulation at the handset part. So the handset will be constrained because it is going to become more farther and farther depending upon how big this coverage area is. So if your handset goes beyond a certain area, then even if the BTS is capable of reaching you because of the higher transmission rate, the handset will not be able to reach back, and therefore you are constrained by this limiting factor. Therefore you will not get this kind of advantage that is going to get derived by increasing the BTS power because of the relaxed rules. Okay. Now there is another issue is that the when you are transmitting, right, at the forward direction, and the handset is transmitting in the reverse direction, the forward link bit rate is going to increase because you have got better power. Whereas the reverse link power is going to diminish because the handset is going to become farther and farther away on the net, on the, it will go farther away from the BTSs, because the power as it reaches the antenna system from the handset is going to diminish, and therefore your upload speeds are going to decrease, and that is where the problem would come. So you will not have a significant gain from this kind of approach. Now let's talk about the next slide, which is basically talks about the health risk. Are there going to be any health risk because of the change in threshold limit? Again, if you ask me, it is no. Because why? There are two main reasons. One is that whatever limits that has been set today by the regulator is much below international standard, right? And second is that when the DOT does audit of this base station site, you will see that the audits are well below the DOT prescribed threshold limits, in a practical consideration. For that, what I will do, I will take you to a dashboard which I have prepared. So this is a dashboard which I have prepared, and let me tell you how to read this dashboard. Now this dashboard, let me just first zoom out a little bit so that you can see how the dashboard looks. This is the dashboard which is posted in my website. I'm going to share a link in the description. So you'll see that this dashboard has got two sections. This is the section which basically talks about the DOT prescribed limit, and this is the measured value. Now, how to read this dashboard? You will see that this dashboard has got states and union territory on this side, and then there are power levels which are basically populated on the x-axis, right? Which are DOT prescribed limits. So what I've done is I've basically created some kind of histogram. Now, what does this histogram basically does? It basically limits the counts of those locations of the map to the various state to a specific point about DOT prescribed limit, because this prescribed limit may not be as accurate as been specified here, which is within the range. So what I've done is that I took a bin size of 0.02 watt per square meter. So if you see here 0.02, then 0.044, then 0.046, like that. So what I have done is that I have aggregated all the BTS's locations where the DOT audit was done in the year 2024-25 and counted how many such locations which falls within this particular category of threshold limit. So you will find that 0.042 falls around 56 BTS's which were basically audited, and these are falling into this category. So probably you understand how this has been structured. Now this is about threshold, setting the threshold limit. Now the measured value are anchored around various power levels here, which are spread by a bin size of 0.01 watts. So you'll find that mostly BTSs have 1020 BTSs. So let me just zoom out a little bit so that you understand. 1020 BTSs out of the total audit which was done in the year 2024-25 falls within the category which is virtually zero. Means you even have taken four decimal places, it still falls within that particular category. Means virtually it is not even close to any of the threshold limit set. And you will find that as the distribution goes to a higher level, the maximum distribution for the year 2015-25 is 0.2 watts versus the maximum threshold limit of 1 watt. So here there is only one BTSs, there are only very few BTSs. So 97% of the BTSs actually falls within a very small threshold value, which clearly says that the compliance level, there is a margin for compliance level is very large versus the threshold limit set. So even if you increase these threshold limits, it is not going to make a huge difference. Now let's come back to my article. Now, as I explained to you, threshold versus measured value. So what do we conclude? The conclusion is very simple, that the threshold limits pose minimum health risk. Because why? Because there is a huge compliance margin which is available. Second is that you can't change the intersite distance. If you change the intersite distance, what happens is that your coverage, the capacity basically network is going to get dismantled. And then if you raise the power level in a capacity based network, what will happen is, let's go to that particular slide which I showed you, the capacity network. So here, what will happen, let's say if I start increasing power levels, then what will happen is that the sites which are close to each other, for example this site, is going to get interfered with this site, and therefore the overall performance of this antenna system and the BTS system is going to go down because of huge interference caused because of the height power transmission, increased power transmission from this base station. Therefore this is not advisable to do. So that is not going to give you any advantage. And then the worst case principle, which I told you, that even if you have higher frequency bands which are located in those locations, because of the lowest frequency band has got very conservative threshold set, therefore you will not get any gain from those higher frequency spectrum, even though the threshold is high, because of the aggregation principle and the worst case principle that we are following. So therefore, What happens in a coverage-based site? What will happen is the uplink performance is going to get limited because of the handsets are going to become much farther away, and their SAR configurations are remain unchanged, and therefore the networks will become much more asymmetric. Means BTS's downlink is going to increase, but the uplink performance will keep on decreasing. So though it is not all bad. First there is, so let's count. First, there is no health risk. Second is that there will be some level of advantage in some locations where you do not have an aggregated bunch of base station anchored with a low frequency band. For example, millimeter wave. In millimeter wave is a 26 gigahertz band, which will now have a threshold limit of 5 watts versus 1 watt. Now, if you have a pole mounted millimeter wave, then you do not have any low frequency base station located in that particular pole. Then what happens is that now instead of transmitting 1 watt, you will be able to transmit 5 watts. Therefore, the millimeter wave coverage is going to become better. So definitely there will be some advantage, but the overall advantage is going to be for new deployments which is going to come, not the existing deployment as much, because the base stations has already been tuned for a certain power transmission capability, and those are not going to get disturbed in the short term because it is going to have a very drastic impact on the overall network design, which may pull down the capacity and the structure of uplink versus downlink. So friends, I hope that you have understood these nuances, and you can basically go through my article and you will get a better understanding of the EMF thing. There are a lot of misconception about EMF. It's a very complex topic. I tried my level best to explain to you in as simple terms as possible. Hope you have liked this video, and let me know if you have any question in the comment section, and I'll come back with a new video next time. Thank you very much.